Is Elon Musk following a specific game plan for Twitter? According to NBC News, on the day, public records revealed that Musk had become Twitter's biggest shareholder. An unknown sender texted the SpaceX CEO and recommended an article pleading him to fully acquire the social network. The three texts were allegedly sent on April 4th, 2022. Describing a series of actions Musk should take after gaining full control of the platform. Step 1, they said, blame the platform for its users. Step 2, coordinated pressure campaign. Step 3, exodus of the blue checks. Step 4, deplatforming. The messages, which were revealed in a court filing last year, match the subtitles of the article. The battle of the century. Here's what happens if Elon Musk buys Twitter, which had been published 3 days earlier on the right-leaning website Revolver News. Now, the site is run by blogger Darren Beatty, the former Trump White House speechwriter who was fired in 2018 for speaking on a panel alongside white nationalists.
Russian journalist on the state channel Russia One implied that Musk is their agent.
А в Киеве замечен автомобиль марки Tesla с похабным оскорблением создателя электрокара. В общем, борются как только могут. Сам логотип компании на Украине теперь тоже предлагают писать через букву Z. Так что у Маска действительно остается лишь один выход – признать, что он на стороне России и, наконец, отрезать ВСУ от доступа к своему спутниковому интернету Starlink.
Meanwhile, Musk is facing a defamation lawsuit for falsely accusing a man of being a part of a neo-Nazi brawl. Ben Brody, a 22-year-old Jewish man from California, filed a lawsuit against Musk on Monday after he said he and his family were forced to leave their home after harassment and threats after Musk, quote, promoted a dangerous conspiracy against him, the Huffington Post reports.
The lawsuit is based on a fight that took place between neo-Nazi group Rose City Nationalists and the Proud Boys group in Oregon early this year. In video footage from the fight, a member of the RCN has his face mask pulled off, and people on the internet went to work trying to identify him. Musk heightened the false conspiracy that Brody was the man in the mask and suggested he was part of a false flag situation. Okay, so there's a lot here. The first is that whether or not this series of tweets that's been disclosed as a consequence of litigation indicates a plan that Elon Musk has, in fact, been following. The argument is that he seems to have been doing the things in the step 1, 2, 3, 4.
And they do a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, so what do we take for that? What does it mean? Do these tweets then have predictive value for where the site is going? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I guess it's a good thing if you believe them in terms of knowing what's to come. I do think for Musk and his supporters, I mean, this is a big coincidence, Bree. I mean, it's a big coincidence seeing some of the changes that have come. Now, it's possible to be a coincidence. I happen to like Elon Musk. I think he's doing a lot of fascinating things, particularly in the area of jet propulsion and engineering. But I will say how he's managed Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter, is not the most ideal to me. But who the heck am I? I'm not the richest guy in the world. But I just think this sort of plays to what a lot of individuals on the left will say in terms of Musk and many conservatives, that they are Putin puppets or that they are Putin supporters versus supporting America and America's interests. And we can debate whether or not there's legitimacy to that. But I think for Musk, he'll probably look at this and say, yeah, look, this is just a coincidence. I'm running this app the way I've always envisioned. And there is some credence to that. When he changed the name to X, many people who worked with him, I think about 20 years ago, said he always wanted to do an X type of app that was a one-stop shop. And so there is some consistency there.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like the accusation here, I'm trying to read between the lines of how, for example, NBC was covering this story. It almost seems like the worst part is not that there is a relationship between what Elon Musk seems to have done since he bought the site and what this article is predicting for him, but that the nature of the website, the association of the author with these white nationalists, and some of the sympathy expressed in the article for, let's say, this is the kind of NBC characterization of it, sympathy for Russia. is leading people to say, well, if he was following the advice in this article, then is Elon Musk as a person sympathetic to the same interests or ideologies that the people who wrote the article is sympathetic to? So even if step 1, 2, 3, 4 isn't a bad thing, you know, is it bad that Elon Musk is taking advice from people like this?
Yeah. I mean, people can take advice from whomever they want, Bree. Whether I agree with it or not. I mean, this idea.
Do you really think that's true? Would you not be concerned to discover that? Let's say that you have there's an innocuous article about like how to put together a stylish coat, tie, shirt combo. Not that you would need that advice, sure, Michael. But let's say you find out that one of your commentators got that advice, or you saw that advice on your timeline because it had been lifted from a right-wing site.
Yeah.
And would that not give you some pause as to whether or not your friend or whoever it is that's on your timeline was reading that site as opposed to all the other places on the internet where you could get style advice?
Sure. I mean, I would certainly wonder. I'd be curious of why this particular person or that particular site over another. But I would be careful in too quickly trying to form an opinion without complete details. And I think it's important. And Musk appears like, hey, this isn't something that I follow. This just happens to be somewhat of a coincidence. And I think we have to give some level of credence to that belief being accurate.
Yeah, I mean, especially the nature of Twitter is that sometimes things really do come across their timeline that are random and you don't really know the context or who said what.
Because, Brie, I've retweeted stuff politically that I thought, this is a good point. And then I've gone to the person's page and looked at all the stuff and I said, oh, hell, now I'm retweeting some extremist. And I didn't know because I just saw something that I thought was like, that's an interesting
it's just an isolated clip, like a video from something that happened in Congress. And, you know.
So now I've learned to go to people, which is crazy now, but I've learned to go to the page, look at what they're retweeting, because next thing you know, people say, well, why are you supporting someone like this? Like, I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, I do think that the more, problematic or damning story from Elon Musk's perspective is the second story that we read there at top about how he is now being sued for libel for accusing this young
man, the 22-year-old,
of being affiliated with a neo-Nazi group who is himself Jewish. And on the basis of not much at all. And so now we're getting back to this question of what responsibility people have, whether it's someone like Donald Trump or Elon Musk, people with huge followings and platforms and who have a history of people kind of following their lead and doing what they say, targeting people somewhat irresponsibly. There's one question, free speech, does he have a right to do it?
Yeah.
Sure, but we also do have some constraints on free speech, and those include libel and slander laws. And are you going to have to be accountable?
I think you can, Bria. I think, I'm a big supporter of free speech. I think we can say, hey, you have the right to say this. But when someone sues you for this stupidity, they have the right to file a libel suit against you. And if you're found guilty of that, then you have to pay out whatever a judge or jury ultimately decides. So I absolutely think we can say, hey, we want people to have the ability to stand in their truth, whatever it is. And if that truth causes some type of harm to an individual, then the individual has the right to sue for that. And so I say if you're going to say these types of things or retweet these types of things, just be prepared for the possibility that there could be harm unjustly done or unduly done to someone, and that may not have been the case. But just because that wasn't the case, Bree, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be held responsible. Yeah,
and I'm just grateful that nothing physically happened to this young man, nothing that can't be undone. Because I do think, look, I know there's a lot of legitimate concerns about governments pressuring social media companies and those kinds of speech infringements, and I think that the focus really should be there. But there is this also, I think that the free speech framing of everything, the constitutional framing of everything, does prevent us from having a serious moral conversation about what Elon Musk's obligations are on this app as someone with so many followers and so much influence.
Yeah.
He did in this case what he routinely does, which is a story will happen and he'll say, interesting, or very odd.
Yeah, and he'll repost it.
And that attracts so much attention. So he replied very odd under someone who had indicated that Brody was a participant in this neo-Nazi thing, which, again, is going to, it validates. And he uses language that he can kind of wiggle out of. He doesn't say, this is the guy.
Yeah.
But the effect ultimately is very similar. Does he have a responsibility to rein that in?
I will say, I have associates who work for very influential people, And sometimes if they're trying to get a point out for something that they don't want to, a position that they don't want to publicly take, they will say, well, this is a unique story.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And so you kind of can read between those lines. And I wonder, Bree, though, does Musk oftentimes when he's replying to some of this stuff, and I follow him and I get all of his alerts, and when I see some of the stuff he replies to, I'm like, I wonder if he even took the time to research some of this stuff.
I mean, he clearly did.
Or if Musk just looking at it, he's like, oh, well, this looks ridiculous, so I'm going to say interesting, or I'm going to retweet and say, oh, check this out. And I would just say, look, man, Musk, you have a lot of support. People like what you're doing on the app. A lot of conservatives think the app is more friendlier to conservatives. Just be a little more responsible and careful with some of the things you're putting out there. Just be sure of the stories first. I think that's important. And I think, people who follow him would have an appreciation to know that he's taking the time and doing his due diligence before replying to something.
Yeah, especially the power imbalance, not just because of his platform, but he's someone with, he's the richest man in the world who complained a great deal when he accused someone of doxing him for publishing publicly available airplane records. And he's the man with all the security and defenses in the world.
Yeah.
What is this young man Brody supposed to do when he is being singled out by the wealthiest and one of the most powerful people on the planet Earth?
That's a good point.
All right, stick around. We have more Rising for you right after this.